Today I'm going to show you how to make this no-sew travel watercolor or sketchbook folio. If something like this interests you, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hey guys, it's Nik the Booksmith. Welcome back, welcome back. Sometimes it's not very practical to bind your pages in by sewing them. Sometimes you want to be able to take them in and out and refill the cover, refill the container. This should fill that need for people that want to use the same cover, take pages in and out without dismantling the whole thing. So I am going to use some 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. And I've got several sheets here. I think close to 2 dozen. They are approximately 6 by 8. The size of the paper doesn't matter. You can start with any size of paper that you like. The project will be based and measured off the size of your paper. So whatever you start with, you should be able to adapt it to any size you'd like. I just thought this would be a nice travel size. To go with that, we're going to need some chipboard, and this is some upcycled chipboard off the back of notepads. And I think this one was actually from the back of an old picture frame, but it's the same thickness as this piece and this piece. The piece that will go on the bottom, so we'll use this piece, is just slightly larger than the paper. So I'm thinking like 1/8 of an inch beyond the edge, 3 millimeters or so beyond the edge of the paper. This top piece is the same height or width this way, depending on how you want to do it, but it's about 1/4 of an inch shorter on one long side. And then this is about, 1/3 of the length of that longest bottom board. It's the same height, but it's about 1/3 or a little better, maybe a little bit more than 1/3. Again, that's irrelevant. You can make it any size you want, or you can leave it off. And let's see, we'll also need some cardstock. This is 100 or 110 pound black cardstock. I think it's 110 pound. It's nice, sturdy black cardstock. Again, this part is optional, except we do need a little piece of this, but I'm going to go a little far and beyond what you need it for. So you just need a scrap of pretty sturdy cardstock. You could even use a piece of a file folder, like a manila file folder or something. And you'll also need some decorative paper of some kind if you choose to go that route. This is a pattern that I printed on the back of this Lacta paper that I love. All the stuff that I normally love and use a lot, like the Lacta paper and some other things, they are listed on my Amazon favorites list, which is always below the video. And this will be in the Booksmithables section. There's a tools section, but that's for tools. The Booksmithables is for like supplies. I don't know why I didn't just name it supplies, but I didn't, so that ship has sailed. All right, so let's get started. Now, what we want to do is we want to determine where we want the holes that we are going to use to mount this paper and to keep it secure to the board. And I have chosen just 2 holes on this side. So whether the sketchbook or watercolor book will sit in this orientation or this orientation, it won't matter because the holes will be up here. That is one thing about this project that you will have to keep in mind. Let me get one of these, is that there will be holes on one side of the paper. Literally, I mean, it takes off like 1 inch. So just keep that in mind, that if you want your finished paper to be a certain size, to allow for that 1 inch margin to be sliced off later if you choose to slice it off, and because we have to use that for where it gets bound to the book, okay? And I have already put holes in the bottom chipboard, and they correspond, hopefully, with the holes that I've put in most of the paper already. And what I did was I just put a piece of the paper that I'll be using, whether it's cut down or taken right out of a pad or whatever. And I just marked with a pencil where I wanted those to be. And then I used the Crop-A-Dial to make holes through the chipboard because it's pretty sturdy stuff. Although there's all kinds of things you can use to put holes. There's different kinds of punches, and you can even poke a hole with an awl if you want to, a ice pick or something. And then for the paper, you can just use a regular paper punch if you want. You then use this to set up a piece of paper wherever it is that you want, how you want it to sit. Turn it over and you mark those holes on the back of that paper and you punch those holes, and then you use this one to finish up putting holes in the rest of the pieces of paper. If you have some kind of magical contraption that you can line up several pieces of heavy paper and put holes in them all at once, I mean, go for it. That would rock. I think some of those binder punches will do it. You know. So some of you might have that and some of you might not. But most everybody can get their hands on a paper punch. You might even be able to go to the local charity shop, thrift store, etc., and get one for 50 cents. All right, so now we have all of these. I think all of them have holes in them. I punched more than I needed. So let's set those aside for the moment, and let's take our bottom piece. Oh, and one other thing that you might keep in mind too, watercolor paper has two different sides on it. So if you're using watercolor paper, of course, if you're a watercolorist, you already know this, but there's a rough side and there's a smoother side. So whatever side it is that you prefer, you might want to mark that so that when you put your holes first in this bottom piece, you don't want to accidentally get it flipped around the other direction and then the holes don't exactly line up because, yeah. So just keep that in mind to maybe mark that if you need to. What I'm going to do now is, and this part is unnecessary, but we know that I am the queen of unnecessary. I'm going to take the cardstock, which is apparently almost exactly the size of this chipboard. Almost. And I'm going to cover it because I don't want to see this. I don't want to wrap it around because it is really, really thick. So I just didn't feel like I wanted to do that. If you have the same problem I'm going to have, you can take some paint or a Sharpie and you can color in the sides, because if I don't wrap it around, you'll see the chipboard. You know what I mean? But if you paint it or Sharpie it, then you'll hide that. Again, absolutely, totally not necessary whatsoever. There are a lot of steps in this procedure where you can either skip them because it's just, you know, decoration. It's just making it pretty, or you can easily substitute with something else. And I will be sure to mention that along the way. So give me about 30 seconds and I will finish this up, because if I don't, it'll just bug me. And you guys don't want me any more distracted than I already am on a regular day-to-day basis. Alternatively, you could use some of the decorative paper and put it on the inside, wrap it around to the back, and then use this to enclose if you wanted to. So that's another option. I'm going to use tape for the sake of brevity. However, use whatever you want. Just keep in mind that any kind of adhesive that has moisture in it like PVA will contribute to warping the board if you don't use the same amount on the opposite opposing side of the board to even out the pull. So just, you know, FYI. I'm going to get my punch and go ahead and punch those holes. This will probably happen a couple of times because I'll show you here in a minute, but I didn't want to misplace where they are. And now for, if you want to make it pretty on the inside. So I'm going to have it lay on here kind of like that, I think. I'll turn that over. And the lock to paper, just for future reference, does not have a discernible grain. So it's not usually something you have to worry about. Not that this is one of those occasions where you would have to worry about the grain. Not in this instance, at least. Oh, and the lawnmowers just showed up, so, you know, because of course they did. I never know when the neighbors are going to get their lawn mowed. It's like they do it just to surprise me or something. It's like, I know you're messing with me, man. Okay, so there's the bottom. This will be the top piece, you know, duh. I'm going to repeat that process. I know, it's so exciting, right? Now go get yourself a drink or fudge bar or something. Popsicle. Oh wait, before you get your popsicle, just an FYI, on this piece, I am going to wrap the edge. Just to keep you on your toes. Now the reason why I didn't care that there's like a blank spot over here and then over here, I mean, it just barely wraps around. I'm gonna put a piece of like cardstock on the reverse side. So it'll hide this. It is a little, like, not very much. That might make some of you nervous. Totally understandable. So leave more room. It's just, I only printed out 2 pieces of this paper and I really don't want to have to go print another one. Wrapped around as snugly as I can. Snugly. See, it works. And then on this side, I'll just barely trim off those little corners. I didn't want to trim it off too soon and then not have enough, so. Okay, you can go get your popsicle now. This is not the critical construction part. This is more like wrapping a present. All right, so there is most of the top. And then on this side, I think I even have, so this is a lighter weight piece of cardstock, but I'm just going to use this because it's sitting here. That was serendipitous. I'm going to tape the paper because I want to make sure the edges are very, very stuck down. And now I can put a piece or a couple on the inside of the perimeter. just to finish that up before I take off all the tape, because that would be the kiss of death. I'd never get it straight then. Now I can remove the backing off of the rest of the tape. And I'll just slice this edge off. So there is the bottom, the top, and then I have this piece. And it too will have this covering. How is everybody? Hope everybody's okay. I've been out of the loop, loopless. It's a technical term. So if there's something going on the planet, I'm probably not that aware of it. I wasn't feeling good, and so I just kind of shut down. And when you don't feel good, sometimes you don't, I don't know, maybe you guys are different, but I don't usually watch the news, or I feel bad enough. It's like I don't need to add to the misery, you know what I mean? I'm just gonna kind of center-ish this. One thing that I probably need to consider before I head off headlong into finishing this up and then not even considering it is my closure. Now there's different kind of closures that you can use if you have like Velcro dots. I mean, use Velcro dots and hot glue to stick it on. I don't care, I'm not your mom. So whatever you want to do. I have decided I'm going to use some of my little neodymium magnets because they're super wicked strong. And so I'm going to mark 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. And what I'm going to do is slice along where I just marked and just peel up some of the chipboard to hide that magnet. I should have done it on the back of that too, but I didn't. So do as I say, not as I do, apparently. Okay, that's good enough. I'm going to take some of this glossy accents and I'm going to put a few dots in the bottom. And I'll lay that down in there and it will dry at some point. I'm going to take a piece of masking tape just to lay that over it and, I don't know, really make sure that it's not going to go anywhere until that dries. And now I can finish wrapping this around the edge. Okay, you can go get your popsicle. I'm done. Done messing around. Where's my tape? I am going to use a tiny bit of glue. Just so that I can pinch those little corners in. I can wrap that around and it shouldn't go anywhere. And then the same on this side. For the spine, I'm going to take that piece of cardstock that is the same height as the boards. And I'm going to take this scoreboard. If you don't have a scoreboard, then you can use like a short little stack of newspaper and you can put your cardstock on that and use a ruler and score it. By putting it on top of newspaper, it allows the whatever you're using to score with, it could be the end of a paintbrush or a ballpoint pen that doesn't have any ink in it, something like that. it allows that indentation to be made. I'm going to go in 1 inch and make a line. And I'm going to end up doing, I think, 7 tick marks in all. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to go 1 more inch and mark that, and that's where that will get cut. How I determined the number of score lines was I took my stack of paper and my 2 cover boards, and I measured pretty much the thickness of that, and then I added another tick mark. So let me cut this. Now I'm going to do that again, but for this one, it'll be for the other side where this board is, the little board. So then you have to add that to the mix. So basically I just added an extra tick mark, and it'll be 8. So I go in 1 inch. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I go 1 inch, and that's where I'll cut it. And if you don't have a scoreboard, each of these tick marks are 1/8 of an inch, or like 3 millimeters away from each other, as long as there are several within that area. So take all the paper that you have, the thickness of the stack, and then put the backboard and the cover board with that, and then add like another 3 or 4 millimeters or another 1/8 of an inch, a tick mark. And then for the opposite flap side, then you'll want to add another tick mark. And another thing that I would suggest when you are making these little scored spines, make sure that when you cut your pieces off the cardstock, that you make sure that it's going with the grain and not against the grain. For most paper, most cardstock sold, it's going to be, the grain goes with the long edge of the paper. And so you'd want to cut it so that your score lines will be going parallel with the long edge of the paper and not the other way, just because it just doesn't work as well. And now I just need to put tape on these. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whiter tape, and I'm going to snug it up against the tick mark, the score line, sorry, on one side. And then also snug up the tape to the last score line on the other side. And then I shall trim off the excess. So now we have 2. And I'm just going to line this up. Just like that. And then the top gets lined up. Like so. And then on this side, we'll do a similar thing. And we'll take this, and remember, wherever our closure is, that needs to stay to the outside. Now I have to re-poke these holes and cover the inside of that flap. All right, I poked the holes through that binding thing that I put on, and to put the papers into the folio, I'm going to use these, they're screw posts, but they also call them, I think it's Philadelphia screws or something like that. Anyway, you can get them on Amazon, and they come in all kinds of sizes. from very, very short to actually really, really long. So you could make some really thick books if that's what you were intending to do. So I have chosen a couple that I wanted to use, as that pertains to how many papers I wanted to carry in my book at one time. So what you do, I'm going to turn it over to the back side, and the post piece goes through those two holes. They use these little contraptions a lot in like luggage and handbags and stuff like that too. If you have an old dictionary, sometimes dictionaries and different kinds of textbooks will have really long posts that you can take some of the pages out. They'll be punched and you can take those out. So here is about, I'm going to say probably 20 of my pages, and I'm going to put the screw end on this side, she says. You don't have to use a screwdriver. They can just be finger tightened, it's fine. And then I'm going to close this up and close that up. And I wanted to set the other magnet. Okay, where did I put? Here's one. And it will find the one that we already put in this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit of, I don't know, some paint. I'll line everything up and mark where that is. Now I'll move this out of the way. And now I can, cat's killing me, man. I can mark where the other one is going to go and slice a channel for it. And those you can also find on Amazon for really inexpensively. I think I got like 60 of these for, I think it was 11 or 12 bucks, or I don't remember. Anyway, they were really cheap. They sure are a lot of bang for your buck because they're so strong, and they are in all kinds of sizes. You can get round ones and square ones and rectangle ones, you know, and different thicknesses. I think these are, I think 1.5 millimeter or something. That's pretty thin. You can hide that pretty well. And I should have put it underneath the paper, but I didn't. So here we are with the consequences of my actions. Trying to get all the debris out of the grave here. Feels like I'm playing Operation. Do you remember Operation? If I really did operate on somebody, they'd probably end up in a grave, so comes around full circle. All right. And there we go. That should fit in there just fine and dandy. Grab my glossy accents yet again and dot some in there. I'll stick that in there with the paint side down, because that's how we stuck this to this, and the clean side was stuck to so we know that that's the side that it wants to be stuck to, because they do stick better to one side than they do the other. because that's how magnets are. And now I can cover this with something. And it won't be masking tape because then that would be ugly. I do have some of this paper, Locta paper, that is pre-printed, meaning I didn't do it. And it's kind of pretty. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I'll do that. For over the magnet, I'll use just some plain gold. And I'm going to I put tape right in the very center. And then around the edge, I will add glue. There we go. I just wanted it so that you couldn't see it when the flap was closed. So that is pretty much it. If you don't have access or just don't want to get posts, you could always run some kind of twine through those holes and then tie it up here at the top, I suppose. And then you could just untie it to take your pages out. If you are watercoloring, and whether you watercolor this way or, you know, have it the other way, then you can either leave it in here and let it dry, or you can take it out and let it dry. And then you can move the ones that you've already sketched on or watercolored on, whatever the case may be, to the back of the stack and then have a clean one on top. But I thought this was a fairly easy construction. Doesn't use any specialty materials because you can use twine if you want to. You don't have to use magnets to close it. You could always maybe do either 2 holes and run some elastic through it and then have a button attached to this part of the front cover, and you could stretch it over to attach. Or you could attach some kind of a string or something to this, and then you could wrap it all the way around and tie it. You know, there's all kinds of things you can do. What I like about this project is I think it makes a fairly nice presentation for a gift for somebody that is into art, or even like writing music. You could put, what do they call the paper it's sheet music, but there's no music on it yet. It's just the lines. That could be put in here. You could use this to travel with you, and you could totally just fold these back and put this up on an easel and paint or sketch or whatever. And then it gets all closed up and everything is neat and tidy and enclosed on the inside. Well, I think that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this little no-sew option. Maybe there's something you're thinking of that you could translate this technique for, and I hope it was helpful. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I hope everybody is having an excellent week, and I will see you all really, really soon in the next video. Bye, guys.